All right, we are going live. I was almost asleep in my thoughts. Wasn't asleep. I was just in deep thought. Did I just hear a bing? If I heard a bing, I'm gonna be very upset. And so I was over on Twitter reading some translated stuff, and it's always interesting to get a perspective of others. Let's see here. I'm repeating myself here. Boop. All right. Oh, here she is.
Just wanted to provide you all an update on our ongoing efforts on Hurricane Ida.
Oh yeah,
The
Ida.
president and his Homeland Security team are closely monitoring the impacts of Hurricane Ida as damage
Thanks.
assessments continue. He has made clear that the state, tribal, and local officials who have requests for anything have our full support, and we are, of course, in close contact. Today, the FEMA administrator and the American Red Cross director in Louisiana to meet with the governor and survey the damage from Hurricane Ida. Administrator Criswell will travel to Mississippi tomorrow to meet with state officials. And as Ida continues to move to the northeast, we expect heavy rain to continue. There's life threatening flash flooding that remains a threat in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, D.C., and elsewhere. In the Gulf Coast, search and rescue efforts are underway. 12 urban search and rescue teams are currently operational in Louisiana to support state and local efforts. The Coast Guard has been doing overhead flights, including in Grand Isle, to search for anyone in need of assistance. So far, urban search and rescue teams have assisted over hundreds of survivors, and their work continues. We're also in regular contact, which is a huge priority for people in the region, with private electricity companies to ensure they have the resources they need as they work to restore power in Louisiana and Mississippi, where more than 1.1 million customers remain without electricity. We've seen some people in Mississippi get electricity back, and
Oh, she
D.C.
doesn't know what she's
continue
doing.
improvements. There are more than 25,000 linemen from 32 states and D.C. in the region racing to restore power. And FEMA has staged nearly 250 generators in the region to support impacted areas. We're going to get more generators to the area to get more power to the emergency services that need it
Yeah,
the
you
most.
are.
We also have
More
watchdog groups
generators. We're a generator
in
company.
impacted areas of
Why
Louisiana
don't you just get
taking the fight for
send them some
vital
solar
assistance. We
panels?
would encourage anyone in need
Send them
to
solar
assist us to
panels.
visit disasterassistance.gov or call 1-800-621 FEMA. As of this morning, 48 shelters are open in affected areas throughout the
Oh,
state.
48
FEMA has
shelters.
staged
What
more
does
than
that have to do with
1,000
anything? This is something that
meals,
governor should be
1.2
saying.
million liters of water, and more than 124,000 tarps in the region. And additional ambulance crews have been transported to Louisiana and Mississippi. The Department of Transportation also issued a regional emergency declaration for states including Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and
What are you
Texas,
gonna do? Fill
providing
some
full
potholes
support in
now?
transporting fuel as well as essential items like food, water, and power restoration equipment to support emergency relief efforts. And today we have two additional actions to announce to increase the availability of gasoline and ease price pressures. First, the department
That should always.
Recommend an emergency declaration that offers temporary flexibility to how many hours a truck driver can drive. This applies nationally to goods that support the COVID-19 response and will now
That should
include gasoline, other
always
types of fuel, building materials,
be
medical
removed.
supplies, and food. Because the hurricane is hitting a region that is a key center of the nation's oil production and refining infrastructure, this waiver should help reduce the risk of gasoline shortages or price increases stemming from the hurricane. DOT's top priority remains safety, and this waiver is accompanied by additional safety-related reporting requirements to allow the department to monitor driver working hours. And second, the EPA has approved emergency fuel
Golly, she's
waivers
going
for
fast.
Louisiana and Mississippi, effective immediately, which will expand the supply of gasoline that can be sold in these two states and increase availability at this critical time. We are continuing to assess and we'll continue to provide you all updates. Why don't you kick it off, Josh? Good to see you.
These are things that should always be in place.
First on Afghanistan, the president said that any additional evacuations will go through diplomatic channels and that the United States has leverage over the Taliban. Can you tell us what those channels look like and
What leverage is there?
Well, first I would say I would point you to the remarks that the Secretary of State provided last night, but let me give you some highlights of that.
What did he
We have
say?
enormous leverage over the Taliban, including
Oh.
access to the global marketplace. That's not a small. It's not small.
Meanwhile, the Taliban
Border
is
and
flying
access
people
to
hanging
global
out of the
marketplace,
back
for any
of
watching
Black
from
Hawk
across the global
helicopters.
community. I would note that yesterday the UN Security Council also passed a resolution.
Oh, the
that
UN.
made clear to what
The
the
UN.
expectation is in terms of safe travel and evacuation or departure, I should say, of individuals who want to leave Afghanistan. And nearly half of the countries in the world also signed on to a statement making clear that is the expectation. That's the diplomatic side, and the other
The diplomatic side.
components that our Secretary of State will be focused on include establishing a presence in Doha, which is already underway, which is a place where we will be able to operate from diplomatically, so we can have access with consular officers and
So the
engage with American citizens or others, our Afghan partners who want
closed
to
captioning is coming up before her words are.
The other piece is engagement with the
Look at that.
Taliban, which will continue through our ongoing channels that we have with the Taliban.
How is the closed captioning
The other
coming
piece
up
of this, which is
before
very
she
important
said
for
what she's
operations,
going to say?
which is opening the airport and regional airports, and also ensuring that there is overland travel that is possible.
Right?
Which means
Look at
departing
that.
and being able to leave across borders. And the president touched on this in his statement. On the airport front, the more specific piece we're working on with the Qataris and the Turks, who are
important
partners here, is getting the civilian side of the airport up and operational again, so that
for
we can use that not just for flights for people to depart, but also for humanitarian assistance, which we would work through programs like the World
Food
Program and others.
number of.
So there are a number of channels. This is a priority. The Secretary of
State will be
leading. They'll continue to provide updates.
We're hoping,
and we're hoping to make progress in the
on the country or economy.
Secondly, on the economy, you were asked the other day
How is that coming up before she's speaking?
Benefits. We know that black unemployment in this country is above 8%. It's above 7% in New York, Nevada, Illinois, California. With the expiration, how do you ensure that people
Are these people in the same room?
still get the support they need?
You're right, Josh. It's vitally important to look at the fact that there are different circumstances in different states. So if we just take a step back and look at the national landscape on these benefits, in about half of all states, 24 governors have already made the decision to eliminate pandemic unemployment benefits. That's a choice they have made. In the remaining 26 states, unemployment levels vary pretty widely, from 3% to 7%, and half of these remaining states have unemployment rates that are already less than 5%. So there are differing needs in different states, and governors are making different decisions. What we're trying to do, and what we announced about 2 weeks ago, but obviously there was a lot of news going on, is our effort to put new tools in place to help states that choose to further extend pandemic unemployment benefits because of those needs, because they're states like those you have mentioned, or because they have higher rates of unemployment among African Americans or other groups that need additional assistance. So the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Labor sent a letter to Chairman Wyden and Chairman Neal underscoring and affirming that states can use their allocations of the $350 billion of state and local fiscal relief funds included in the American Rescue Plan. That is funding that can be used. The Department of Labor has also made $90 million in career grants available to support comprehensive reemployment services for all Americans and $146 million in reemployment services and eligibility assessments.
Blah, blah, blah. We're going to do all this stuff, but how does it affect anything? You don't even know.
About how to leverage existing UI program infrastructure to deliver ongoing support.
Listen how fast
to
she's
enslaved
going.
Workers. We have also been engaging directly with states. We've been engaged now with about 30 states and counting to talk about what their specific needs are and how programs that are available can be.
This is
eligible
a
for their states.
this is planned.
First on Ida, thank you for all that information. You still tracking that he might?
Oh,
go
yeah,
to the
thank you.
region At some point.
He certainly is open to that. What he does not want to do is interrupt rescue and recovery.
That means he would get lost. Joe don't want to go down there and get lost, y'all.
People leaving
If he went down there, he might get lost and not know where to come back.
In the days ahead, it isn't always.
You know, he gets distracted by butterflies.
Certainly, there are ongoing efforts.
The
on ground,
monarchs
like I said.
are
So he's open to that. I don't have anything to announce at this point.
traveling right now.
Obviously, the president of the United States going to a region takes a lot of resources.
Oh, it's a lot of resources.
Afghanistan.
Remember they said Trump didn't go down to Katrina? This is the same size storm as Katrina.
Today,
It's
or even away
bullshit.
from the U.S. government at this point.
Well, I will say we remain in touch through a range of means.
Excuse my language.
Email, text.
I didn't mean that.
WhatsApp. Something
what's
that
that?
we could certainly do from here, but also having a presence in Doha and diplomats in the region will enable that.
They
to
use
happen,
WhatsApp.
Locally or close by as well. I don't have an update for you on the numbers, but that's something the State Department would have the best assessment of.
We have asked and we talked a little bit about the president's mood over the last few days, or his sense of all of this. A few of us observed he seemed angry at the beginning of the speech today. Who's he mad at?
He doesn't know.
I would say I'll give you a different assessment of what I saw, which is that he gave a forceful assessment, laid out a forceful case to the American people as to why it was time to wind down a 20-year war that has led to the
What's
loss
that? Is that,
of thousands of lives. And in his
Facebook?
view, and I think he made a firm case of this, it's not in our national security interest to be on the ground anymore.
In North Korea, the ongoing situation there, what's your current understanding of what they're doing with their nuclear program, and is there any renewed outreach to Kim Jong-un and his regime?
Well, we have left the door open and obviously reached out through our channels. I don't have an update for you in terms of any response to our offer. Our offer remains to meet anywhere, anytime, without preconditions. We're obviously aware of the.
Oh, we're going to meet anywhere, anytime.
24 hours, and we're closely coordinating with our allies and partners on developments and assessing closely. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jen, the president said in his remarks just a short time ago that in April, a deadline was set for August 31st. In fact, in his April remarks, he set a deadline for September 11th.
Yeah.
Changed over these last.
Yeah, I even said it was September 11th.
And the September 11th initial deadline, was that a deadline agreed to, a new time frame agreed to by the Taliban or suggested by them?
Oh, the Taliban was leading the negotiations.
The military gave their assessment that they needed 120 days to wind down our presence in Afghanistan. So we abided by that.
But in the April speech, September 11th was the date. The August 31st date just arrived between April and now.
And he bases strategic decisions, tactical decisions, I should say, on the advice of the military and commanders on the ground and the timeline they needed to wind down our presence. And hence, here we are.
Couldn't it be September 1st or 30th?
We moved up the timeline to August 31st.
We needed 120 days, and we abided by the advice of the military. Jeff?
Oh, did you? The advice of the military would probably also help us. We're outnumbered out here. 120 days before September 11th is May 14th.
Are not just our expectation, but also the expectation of 100 countries around the world, the UN Security Council and others, that the Taliban will abide by what they committed to last Friday, which is the ability of people to leave Afghanistan should they choose to leave. There do need to be ongoing diplomatic negotiation or discussions, I should say. That's a part of what the Secretary of State and his team will be leading. But I would note that
you're caught, you dummy.
Friday, a leader of the Taliban.
You're not very smart. She continues to disappoint. I hate people that talk fast because they're trying to hide how dumb they are.
So those are the diplomatic pieces that have moved forward, but this will be a top priority.
I am so dumb.
Has been critical of former President Trump's deal with the Taliban. Given that, I'm wondering if this administration or if this president any consideration to not holding on.
I'm a dummy.
special envoy to Afghanistan who stayed on.
Look, I think the president wanted to be clear about what he was left when he took office, and he laid that out very clearly in his speech. But just to reiterate, since you gave me an opportunity, a couple of the points. When the president took office, there was a deadline that was just 3 months away. That included for May 1st. That included no requirement that the
May
Taliban
1st. Yeah, you keep saying
a
that.
governing agreement with the Afghan government.
Oh.
It did release 5,000 prisoners last year, including some of the Taliban's top.
Oh, that has nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with it.
Into that circumstance, he wanted to leave Afghanistan. It's a war he has long felt we needed to depart from,
And that he was a part of for 8 years.
But that was the circumstance he walked into, and frankly, there's a little bit of selective memory.
It was the circumstance you left. It was the circumstance you left, assholes. You left Afghanistan in Trump's lap.
The Afghan envoy, the U.S. envoy to Afghanistan, who served under President Trump. Why did President Biden hold on to him?
The president has made changes where he saw fit and has not made changes where he felt the person continued to be the right person for the job. That's not a political decision. Go ahead.
So we heard from the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan this morning on Good Morning America. He's mentioned that 98% of those on the ground there in Afghanistan and a small number who remain, they have reached out. They got out, as many people as they could. Is the administration essentially placing blame on Americans who could not get to the airport in time?
I think what the president stated clearly, and I know that Jake Sullivan has stated clearly, and our Secretary of State has stated clearly, is that our commitment remains. There is not an end to our commitment
So
to
dumb.
American citizens
You're
who are
so.
in Afghanistan who want to leave.
You're really, really dumb.
For American citizens who want to leave and want to come home to the United States. It's also important for people to note and understand what the process has been and what we've undergone over the past few months. And that's what the president laid out. And we think it's still important for the American people here in the United States to understand that.
One on Al-Qaeda. So we heard from the president a few moments ago saying that one of the main reasons to go into this war was to get Al-Qaeda. We have heard that Osama bin Laden's security chief has reportedly returned to Afghanistan and has been seen in public. Do you still believe, or does the administration believe, that Al-Qaeda is no longer a threat to America? And given the ISIS attacks that we've seen in the last week,
She is so dumb.
That Afghanistan isn't already a safe haven for terrorists.
Well, I think first there is a very big difference between terrorists' ability to attack U.S. troops in Kabul and to attack the homeland. And we do
The
not
homeland.
assess that any terrorist group on the ground has the ability to attack the homeland in the United States. It is incumbent upon the president, the national security team to prevent
Don't go overseas, y'all.
case, but there is a very big difference between those two.
I know that the military obviously recommended to the president, or at least they recommended to the president that it would be best to leave, keep that August 31st deadline. But the president himself, in his interview with ABC News, said that if there's American citizens left, quote, we're going to stay until we get them all out.
Yeah.
I think the president's explained his rationale for leaving 100 plus Americans behind. But can you talk about why he allowed his credibility on this issue to sort of go out the door?
Awesome.
Well, first, I would say that the president remains committed to getting every American citizen who wants to get out. That's it.
120 days before August 31st is May 3rd.
Every single day. I would also note that over the course of the last 2 weeks, we have seen a terrorist attack that took the lives of 13 of our service members.
Yeah.
And there was and part of our
Because of you.
assessment always is going to be the risks. A risk assessment. So I think the question was, do you leave 6,000 service members as there are heightening threats, heightening risks every single day? Or do you work through a diplomatic process and efforts to ensure that we will have the ability to get these American citizens out? That's the assessment we made.
I mean, after that terror attack, you and he made clear that you weren't going to let the terrorists sort of dictate the timeline. And
we didn't, and we've evacuated tens of thousands of people since then.
I guess, was it a mistake for the president to have promised that we would remain until everybody left the country?
We are going to get every American citizen out. That has not changed.
One last one on.
Are you?
You mentioned the leverage that we might.
Are you?
How access to the global marketplace was a big element of that. Can you kind of explain how the sanctions regime that's currently on the Taliban is going to apply to what is now the government of Afghanistan? Is there a chance for Afghanistan, the country, to access its reserves or avoid those sanctions? Will the central bank be sanctioned? Are they going to have that ability as part of this sort of partnership that you've talked about?
Well, it's going to be based on what their behavior is, and I think
What their
that's
behavior.
clearly outlined that we're going to be watching, as the world will, what the Taliban does. That is certainly allowing American citizens to depart.
So we're gonna
It's
sit
allowing
around
our
and watch.
and our partners to depart.
And sit around,
Also,
twiddling our
how they
thumbs,
operate as it relates to treatment of
our
women,
fingers
human
in our
rights. There's many
noses,
factors at play here. So I
and
don't
watch.
have anything to predict for you. Obviously, there's a great
Who
deal
wants
of
to
that
watch
form
the
of leverage.
Taliban?
You referenced sanctions that are already in place.
Who wants to think
that we have,
of the
that the global
Taliban
community has, and we'll have to assess
as being
how things
a thing of the
develop over
past?
course of the coming days, weeks, and months. Go ahead, Jackie.
One question on the dignified transfer, and I want to get to Afghanistan.
Dignified transfer. What a bunch of
Families have criticized the president's conduct at the dignified transfer. There was a father of one Marine who said that the president could be checking his watch every time
Yeah, he did.
transfer case came out in the plane. And a sister of another.
Watch, they're gonna say that he wanted to know the precise time they were back on U.S. soil.
Is the president looking at his watch, and does he have a message to those people who felt that they were offended?
Well, I would say his message to all of the family members who were there, those who were not even in attendance, is that he is grateful to their sons and daughters.
There were no daughters.
They
It was all
made
sons, you bitch.
That he knows firsthand what it's like to lose a child, and the fact that no one can tell you anything or say anything, or there's
My
no
dog ate my
words that
blood
are
pressure
going to
cuff.
fill that hole that is left by that. He's not going to speak to, and I'm not going to speak to, the private conversations. Of course, they have the right to convey whatever they would like. But I will tell you from spending
What's Hunter
a lot of
Biden
time
doing
with him over
today?
the past couple of days, that he was deeply impacted by these family members who he met just 2 days ago. That he talks about them frequently in meetings. And
Does Hunter
the
Biden have a
incredible
security
service
clearance?
and sacrifice of their sons and daughters.
There were no daughters.
Change their suffering.
There were no
I wanted
daughters.
to convey that still.
They're all men.
On the picture aid to the Taliban that Jake Sullivan was talking about this morning,
Yeah.
he said when it comes to economic and development assistance, with the relationship with the Taliban, it'll be about the Taliban's actions. Should we understand that to mean that economic and development assistance could translate to taxpayer money eventually going to the Taliban at some point? I know it's different from the humanitarian aid we've been talking about, the World Food Program and things like that, but these specific references that Sullivan made this morning.
Well, I would go back to kind of the earlier question on this. There's an enormous amount of money they have at the Federal Reserve. I shouldn't say they. The government of Afghanistan has in the Federal Reserve, which they don't have access to right now. That's actually their money that's being held there.
No,
so
it's
that's
not.
one of the questions
I
here.
bet you
There's
a
also
dollar to
sanctions
donuts
that are
it's
in
not.
place
There's a
on
law
those
about
leaders.
that.
Obviously,
And
that
it's,
prevents them from doing business in various parts of the world. I think that's really what Jake Sullivan was referring
It
to.
can be it's taken by the United States. That is not theirs.
This issue of leverage, and I understand the U.S. plans to use that leverage for safe passage, but what specifically does the U.S. also want to see from the Taliban that they would use that leverage to get? You mentioned human rights or women's rights. Will the U.S. use its leverage if, for example, the Taliban doesn't allow girls to go to school or appears to be violating basic women's rights?
I think the president said that in his speech.
So things like access to the global marketplace would be contingent on girls being able to go to school, fundamental women's rights.
I'm not here to outline specific parameters for you, but what I can tell you broadly is that human rights, women's rights are certainly what the United States and also the global community will be looking at.
And I know the president also said in his speech that assumption about how long the Afghan government would hold on, how long the military would be able to hold on, he acknowledged that was a failed assumption. Who is responsible for that assumption? Is the president frustrated with his team at all for having made that false assumption?
We don't have the luxury of being frustrated. Our focus right now is on continuing to move forward on our diplomatic efforts.
I wasn't even paying attention. I'm sorry. I had to get this.
American citizens out, and to get Afghans who have fought by our side safely
Tweet
settled
out.
in the United States.
There were no daughters.
Go ahead.
A military assumption though, or was that an assumption coming
I
from
don't
the
think
intelligence
anyone
community?
assessed that they would collapse as quickly as they did. Anyone in this room, anyone in the region, anyone anywhere. In the
Well, then
world.
you're entire
Afghans
because
did.
you're incompetent. Why? Because you're freaking incompetent.
The Afghan interpreter who helped rescue then Senator Joe Biden when he was.
I mean, when you saw it advancing a week or 2 weeks beforehand, and instead of doing anything about it, you sped up the withdrawal.
Save me and my family. Don't forget me. What's your response?
Yes, this is the question I've been waiting on.
He and other Afghan allies like him still in the country if the president believes, as he said today, that the mission was an extraordinary success.
Well, I would say first, our message to him is thank you for fighting by our side for the last 20 years. Thank you for the role you played in helping a
Thank
number of
me.
my favorite people out of a snowstorm, and for all of the work you did. And our commitment is enduring, not just to American citizens, but to our Afghan partners who have fought by our side. And our efforts and our focus right now is, as you heard General McKenzie
Are
say
you gonna,
and others say over the last 24 hours,
What?
is to the diplomatic phase. We will get you out. We will honor your service, and we're committed to doing exactly that.
That was the biggest
Just
bunch
to build on
of
some
hot
previous
air.
President Biden said Americans who.
First of all,
were
this
given
guy's saying,
multiple chances,
get me out of here.
dating
I
back
saved
7 months.
Joe Biden
Things that you just noted
in
changed
2008.
dramatically
Saved his
in the
life
last
when he
few
came over
weeks.
here.
My question is, how many
I asked him
families
then,
said
don't
they
forget
wanted to
about
stay
me.
in Afghanistan in
Don't
the
leave me
last
here.
Few weeks, 2, 3 weeks.
He owes me.
It's
Said he
fair
wouldn't
to
forget
say,
me.
For the president to say that
She
they didn't
says,
lead
well,
with
we
a
want to thank.
chance.
I got
As
to
you
thirst
just
down.
mentioned, no one expected the collapse. As
Oh, hang
happened.
on.
And the president himself, for months, was publicly saying that the Taliban would not be running things.
This is a good question.
And also that
So I'm
the
stopping.
would be safe and organized.
Well, I would say first that no one is placing blame here. I think it's important for people to understand, though, what the
Joe Biden already said the buck stops with him.
Well, there are between 100 and 200 American citizens who have not yet departed. 100,
200,
we have also
2,000,
evacuated more than
2,500
American citizens and their family members, and 115,000 other people from Afghanistan. So more than
You act like that's a big
120,000
deal.
people.
Chicago
Major
O'Hare
league
Airport does
or
190,000
able to
people per
evacuate
day.
from the country. It is also very understandable, and I want to be very clear here. The vast majority, if not everyone, though the State Department would have to speak to this, who is still there, are dual citizens who have lived their entire lives in Afghanistan.
Oh,
This is
yeah?
about- I know this is hard for people to understand.
Oh,
who
look.
grew up and live here. This is where they've lived. This is where their family members are. This is their communities. Maybe
Oh,
they,
they
own
wanna be
shops.
there.
Maybe they are. have
They didn't want to be there. The Taliban rule, you
This
dummy.
is not an easy decision to leave. We understand that. And what the president is
Why are
saying
so many
is,
people moving
if
in
you
America
decide to
right
leave
now?
Next week, if you decided 2 days ago and we couldn't get you out, we're going to get you out. And that's what his commitment is.
The,
2 days
immigration
ago,
system, the refugee situation.
These people don't make
The
decisions
immigra-
like
US
that.
Immigration system is already very overstretched.
They're now seeing that you're abandoning them is what it is.
Steps is the
All she is
administration
saying is we're
taking
abandoning them
to
all.
ensure that the tens of thousands of Afghan people who are being resettled here
If
in
you
the
can get
United
out of
States
Afghanistan
are not
somehow,
caught up
do
in
it.
tape, and that they're going to get the resources they need.
Well, first, the president has asked the Secretary of Homeland Security to lead this effort. And there is a process that includes not just a thorough background check and vetting process. but
Background
every
check.
individual
How do you do a
from
background
the
check in a
United
country of
States.
people who are
Some will be
illiterate
going to
and
military
they don't have
bases,
electricity
others
and
will have access
I
to
mean,
a range
what
of
background check are you going to
resources,
do?
including vaccines.
What was your
Those who
previous
are-
address?
Who are parolees will be required to get those
Jeez.
vaccines. And what we are working to do
Oh,
is
yeah,
ensure we are leveraging and working with all of the incredible
They're gonna be
refugee
required to get
resettlement
vaccines?
organizations around the country.
She said
who
they're
are
gonna be
eager
required to
and
get
open
vaccines.
helping these Afghan refugees, also to veterans organizations who are eager and open to helping.
She just said they're going to be
Afghan
required to get
refugees,
vaccines.
resettle in the United States and work through as orderly a process using every lever of government, from the U.S. military, the Department of Homeland Security.
They're coming for you, so you might as well get used to that one.
Go ahead. Amy.
The president was very clear today, as he has been, about why he thinks U.S. forces should not be in Afghanistan right now. But he was part of the Obama administration in 2014 when the then president decided he needed to send troops back to Iraq after several years to deal with the Islamic State threat. Does the president rule out needing to send troops back to Afghanistan to deal with a similar threat should it arise now?
I'm not going to look into a crystal ball in the future, but I think he's been pretty clear he doesn't have an intention to start another war and redeploy troops to Afghanistan. And what we've seen over the past week is that our over-the-horizon capacity can work and has worked in going after ISIS targets and killing people who went after our troops. So that's where our resources and our focus is going to be on at this point in time.
Another little bit of a crystal ball question.
Okay.
Crystal ball question.
Ultimately, it will be up to the president to decide whether to establish diplomatic relations with a Taliban-only or Taliban-led government. And while Secretary Blinken and others have set some of the parameters for that, does the president himself have a view about whether it would be appropriate to ever have a full U.S. diplomatic relationship with Taliban?
Well, just like in any circumstance, it would depend on the conditions. But there's no rush to recognition coming from any aspect of this government or from the international community. Go ahead.
Building on Ann's first question, does the president envision any situation in which he might deploy a large amount of U.S. troops abroad under his presidency? Any sort of foreign conflict that would require the sort of mass troop deployment that he just said we are trying to move past?
Well, I think one of the pieces that he talked about in the speech was how he views our engagement in the world. And I think this is probably why you're asking this question. And the horrible scenes and memories of the last few weeks. And as we think about how we embark on or how we use military force, these moments and these divisions of the last several weeks or months or years should stick in us, and he may stick in our minds. He made clear first we must set clear achievable
This guy,
goals
Jack
for our region.
Prozobiak said,
Clearly focused on the
I guess like she just said
fundamental
that they only left 10% of Americans behind.
I mean,
So
the president
that's
has not
15,000.
hesitated to use force when warranted, when he feels it's been warranted. He has done strikes in certain parts of the world. He has made very clear, and he said today, our work with you, we're not done with you, ISIS. That was a paraphrase, but he said it better.
He said it better because you saw the speech.
He's not going to hesitate to use the capacities and capabilities we have. But he also wants to be mindful about how we use thousands and large swaths of troops. And I think he was sending a clear message about how he views that.
Second question, the president is obviously...
Look at the interpreter here.
The situation by the hurricane, but as we roll into September, should we expect to start seeing him doing public events again for his economic agenda, particularly facing the month in Congress that awaits it?
Absolutely. I think you can expect the president to be communicating over the coming weeks on a range of issues that are front and center on the minds of the American people. Certainly, he gave a speech today on Afghanistan, but certainly you can expect to hear from him more on his Build Back Better agenda, on commitment to getting the virus under control, to speak to parents and those who have kids going back to school. There are a range of issues he's eager to communicate about. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Did the president watch the takeoff of the last flight from Afghanistan yesterday? And has he been in contact with, any of the
the one that left the dogs behind.
Well, he did. I know there's been some reporting out there on this, but I can confirm for you that the president learned of the last flight safely leaving Afghanistan when he was in the Oval Office, meeting with members of his national security team and some senior advisors. And a note was passed to his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who conveyed it to the president, the news to the president. Obviously, in those cases, for those of you who have watched these events closely, you have to wait until they're out of airspace. Hence, it was a little bit before.
Oh, you have to wait till they're out of airspace before you can talk to them?
And he has conveyed repeatedly in meetings that I have at least been in to the military how grateful he is for their work, for the fact that they oversaw a historic airlift operation.
Historic. I mean, God, they're going to wear this one out. Is this true? I don't think it is.
The war facing ISIS threats. He's conveyed his gratitude to them and to the work of his national security team repeatedly.
When does the president plan to sign the bill that was passed in
I really thought she was going to say, when does he plan to take a nap?
Assistance to Americans returning from Afghanistan.
sure as soon as possible, but I will have to check. Go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Jen. Just to go back to the line of questions from Justin, you heard the president say today that he remains committed to getting those Americans out. You said that commitment remains. You said it's an enduring commitment. You talked about the risk assessment that's been underway over the last couple of days or weeks, but it was less than 2 weeks ago when the president told ABC yes when he was asked, "Are you committed?"
Second time person's asked this question about ABC interview.
Gets out. He said yes. So obviously situations have changed. The threat increased, as you've said, but why should those Americans believe that this commitment is enduring when 13 days ago that commitment changed?
You're right. She's absolutely dead on right.
100 American citizens and their family members and 120,000 total people over the last 2 weeks, nearly all of them since that time. But
You've described the
What?
drone strikes as successful in that America.
That doesn't answer the question, Pig Vomit.
It appears that several children were killed in one of the drone strikes. Can you say that
Yeah.
this was successful if that was the collateral damage?
Yeah, what was the name of the people that you supposedly got back?
Carrying out these drone strikes if civilians are going to be caught in the crossfire?
well, first I would say we take civilian casualties and the possibility of civilian casualties incredibly.
Do you know that a environmental impact study is more important than civilian casualties? It is a high priority
the military or CENTCOM
for these assholes.
or confirmed what has been some reporting out there by news organizations. I will note that in CENTCOM's statement just 2 nights ago, they made clear that their assessment was that there was the vehicle that was the target also had explosives in it, and those explosives also led to an impact on the ground, but there's an investigation that's ongoing.
Yeah, and how are you going to investigate that? You going to just walk on in there?
Were killed in both of those strikes.
I believe that's the assessment that's been put out by CENTCOM. Go ahead, April.
Yes, we had a small explosion planned, but a much larger explosion planned. Do you realize how stupid that is? That could depend on the amount of fuel that's in the tank, the gas tank. All right? There's a difference between having, like, maybe I got a gallon or two of gas, I got to go fill up, versus I got a full tank of 20 gallons.
Are we at that point now where some parts of the Gulf Coast, specifically New Orleans and that area, will be placed in another category to help rebuild yet again because of the devastation of Ida?
Well, April, I will say that we're only on a couple days into the storm. I know you've covered these as you've referenced in the past, and we don't know how to assess yet all of the impacts. But what I think
That's
that
there's a
people
lot
of
of stuff you
region
don't know how
and
to
the
do.
Gulf Coast should look at to evaluate how committed the president
You don't know
is
how to
this
dress.
is all of the preemptive resources he put in place, all of those he sent to the region, and the number of resources he's continuing to deploy.
Oh, Biden stopped
So I can't assess
Ida
at this point in time, but I can tell you that the president receives briefings about the hurricane every single day, sometimes more than once a day, and has been for several days, and he's committed.
George Bush didn't go down there within the first week, and everybody said he was a horrible person, that he hated black people. I think that's Joe Biden's thing. He hates black people.
Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He said there will indeed be congressional hearings on this longest war in U.S. history, from the beginning to this moment. What is the expectation of this administration when it comes to these hearings, and what are you willing to offer? Full transparency as it relates to how all of this happened beyond these speeches? But
no, she's not gonna offer anything. You're a horrible person. She sucks.
Well, I would say first, we've already done several briefings with members.
Oh, yeah, we've done
including in the
briefings.
classified setting
Oh.
over the course of the last several weeks. So that speaks to our commitment to answering questions they have, and
That speaks to our commitment. Our commitment.
Working with them on addressing the last 7 months. Now it's a 20-year war, so there's obviously a lot to dig into.
But following up on that, but would this administration be willing to sit before a hearing?
Dude, we did not go into Afghanistan 20 years ago.
Congress and answer questions about their part in this war.
Again, I think we've clearly already been participating in Congress's asks, and we have already been.
We didn't go into
There
Afghanistan
haven't been
20 years
specific
ago.
Requests made that I am aware of, and as they come, we'll speak to those.
Embassies in the area doing in Europe and Spain to support this effort.
Okay. When do we go into Afghanistan?
And just this evacuation and going and shifting from the military operation to that of diplomacy.
Well, there's been a huge role that our nation's diplomats have been playing already to date. Obviously, there's been a Herculean effort by the U.S. military on the ground, but our diplomats, the consular officers, many of them who are on the ground, or those who are making tens of thousands of phone calls to identify Afghan applicants, members of the vulnerable population, American citizens, that work will continue. And that work will continue to help get American citizens and others who have fought by our side out of the country. Go ahead, Rachel.
And the president said there's no deadline to get the remaining Americans who want to leave out of Afghanistan. But is there an acceptable timeline for the president for them coming home?
Well, I would say, Rachel, if someone decides in a year they want to leave Afghanistan, we're going to help them leave. If somebody is now ready to, we're going to help them leave as quickly as possible. So I think that's what he was conveying. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I want to follow up on my question yesterday about deserving Afghans who did not get to leave. I think many people would understand that in the fog of war, despite the best efforts of the Marines and consular officers on the ground, mistakes are made. Marines could grab people or push people out of the gate because of the security.
Okay, so I just found out. So there were two women that were killed in the attacks the other day. I apologize. I thought it was all men. I thought she was grandstanding about it. That's the problem. This is the problem with that social justice warrior thing. This is how you think now. And again, I apologize. I'm not below that at all. They mean the world, and I thank them and their families. And most importantly, I thank God that they got to live.
Were left behind, but individuals who may not have who is not an at-risk individual gets to leave. So is the administration willing to admit responsibility for this situation, and what would be your remedy?
I have no confirmation of what you've just outlined. What I will tell you is that 117,000, approximately, many of them Afghans, people who are not American citizens, were evacuated. That's more people than ever in any airlift in U.S. history. And what our U.S. Marines and what our military did on the ground was work to evacuate as many people as humanly possible, as quickly as possible. And many of those people were SIV applicants. Many of them were green card holders. Obviously, we've given you the number of American citizens, and many of them were just people from the vulnerable populations who we were able to get out. But we are committed to continuing to work in a diplomatic manner to get more people out who want to evacuate. And I would reiterate that we've worked already to get support for a statement from 100 countries around the world to pass a UN Security Council resolution and to make clear to the Taliban that that's our expectation. Yamish, go ahead.
With the Lily-Pad countries agreement, can you give us an overall picture of the structure of these agreements with these countries? What are we paying or providing them in return? And how do we deal with local resentment? And this would also apply to people around American bases who may feel concerned about the threat of either COVID or terrorist threat. How are we dealing with that?
What we're doing is we're relying on all of you to convey clearly what our COVID protocols are, what our security protocols are, what our vetting protocols are. And we're also communicating very closely with governors and leaders in the region. Every country has different agreements. This is not a quid pro quo situation. This is where the international community recognizes
Go back to the UN.
People and nearly 24 countries have met this moment to have a place where individuals who are leaving Afghanistan can be, some before they go to third countries, some before they come to the United States. Jamish, go ahead. I think we got to move on, Patsy. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. My question, the president said that the U.S. should learn from its mistakes in the past. Does the president have any mistakes that he thinks he made during this withdrawal in Afghanistan?
That's a good question. I'd like to know what mistakes he has.
I would say I think the president's been pretty clear that we all had an expectation that the Afghan National Security Forces would fight harder in the end, would fight against the Taliban. We all had an expectation that President Ghani would not flee the country. Those were not expectations that were clearly met. So you can spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. What our focus now on is moving forward on our diplomatic effort, settling Afghan refugees, SIV applicants, and others who are coming to the United States, doing that in a very thorough and clear way, and also getting them settled in communities. That's what our focus has to be on.
That he shouldn't have made those assumptions about the Afghan government. Is that the lesson for him then?
Well, I think most people made that assumption, but I don't have any more for you.
Because he said that the U.S. should learn from their mistakes, but if there's
right, and he laid out clearly what he thinks they are over the past 20 years. Yeah.
Louisiana, the governor said that he's worried that the power outages might start affecting the hospitals. Is there can you make any clarification on whether or not
I did mess this up.
can do anything more to help utility companies, and whether or not there's any sort of estimates on whether or not hospitals will be affected?
Well, so initial reports from the local hospital distributor network indicate no supply chain disruptions, but he is right. I mean, this is an area where we are all watching, and this is why we are continuing to ensure there are necessary generators there, that we are engaged closely with health administrators and others about what their needs are and how we can deliver on them. One of the primary limiting factors on oxygen, which we don't see a shortage on, but is obviously an issue that we have to watch closely, is actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do something on Twitter. I'm trying to
Who can drive around these oxygen tanks and
rectify
facilities out to the hospitals. So there's a number of pieces that
where I
we
made a
need to work
mistake
through,
about there are
as we are
no
preparing
females
in case
killed.
there is a need in that regard.
Marine Corps Sergeant Johanny Rosario-Picardo, all one name, from Lawrence, Massachusetts.
And instead, the United States focused on the airport. Have you been able to review that report, and is it accurate?
Well, I'm not going to speak to private conversations, but what I will tell you
And Marine Corps Sergeant Nicole Gee from Sacramento.
U.S.
Both passed away.
To secure the airport, given the Afghan National Security Forces collapsed from that protection. Our objective has never been, and the president's been very clear about this, having a military presence to control Kabul. So that's never been our objective.
You've talked about how our commitment remains to these Americans, and you talked about how we're switching from a military effort to a diplomatic effort. For the Americans who are currently in hiding and who very much want to come home, not the other set, what is the administration's message to them? Should they try and head to the border? Should they try and book a flight out of there? Or should they remain in hiding and hope that the diplomacy kicks in?
Well, I would just note that we are in touch with a number of these Americans. Not every one, perhaps, but we are in touch. We are in touch with as many of them who we can make contact with through a range of means. That continues. And what our focus is on now, and we'll have day-by-day updates, and this is a very fair and good question, is how can we ensure operationally that there are a range of options for people to be able to depart? Some of that may be over land, over borders. Some of that may be through airplanes. And so we're working again with the Qataris and the Turks on that. We're working to get the civilian side of the airport operational, but those are all pieces we're focused on.
The administration preparing for worst case scenario in some circumstances, hostage situations?
Look, our focus right now is on making clear to the Taliban and to others in Afghanistan that we are going to get these American citizens out, that we are going to hold them to that account. And that's our focus. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, she just gives up and goes. Oh, there she goes, walking away. Well, that was fun. Oh, well, it's a disappointment. It's a sickening time. It's not good. It sucks. I don't know. It's a clown world, what it is. It's all a clown world, but we're here to get through it together. If you made it through this, please give me a subscription. And remember, this is your channel. We're going to build this up. We're going to mess with the algorithms. And we're going to let America know that this is not right. It's like when there is an injustice, no matter what it is, we're going to throw it back. Okay. There is such a thing as like just being nice to each other. And that's what we're going to do. So listen, love you guys. Be good to each other. Stay safe until next time. I don't know. Just have fun at it. All right. Don't let the clowns get you down. Peace.